Let me give you some background. Let's call her Sue, not her real name. We met at a friend's engagement party, and man, she was stunning. Blonde hair, tall, skinny, and beautiful. Plus, she had a killer sense of humor, and we hit it off at the party. We started dating, and I knew from the start that she was the one I wanted to be with forever. I popped the question and asked her to move in with me, but she hesitated. I figured maybe she wanted to keep her independence, which I respected. Most of the time, I ended up staying at her place since I had a house in the suburbs that I almost paid off, and she lived in the city. It was convenient, and I didn't mind spending nights at her apartment instead of driving back home. She was a nurse, so sometimes I had to stay alone in her place when she had late shifts. So at first, she wasn't ready to move in with me, because she didn't want to give up certain privileges. You see, she didn't have a car, and getting around would have been really tough for her. She actually wanted me to move into her place, but I'd already pretty much paid off my house's mortgage, so that wasn't an option. Plus, her apartment was too small for both of us. Then, COVID happened, and everything changed. Because of the lockdown, she decided to move in with me. She worked as an essential worker, so she was out most of the time, while I had the luxury of working from home as a software engineer. Because of the pandemic, we had to put our wedding plans on hold. To make things even more complicated, my dad had flown in to be with us for the wedding, but he got stuck here. Luckily, he didn't have to go to work, so he ended up leasing Sue's empty apartment since she wasn't ready to let it go yet. You know, it's important to mention that my dad and I weren't really close back then, but we were okay with each other. He left my mom and me when I was still a teenager, just so he could be with his secretary, who happened to be just 6 years older than me. It hurt at first, but I eventually got over the resentment since he didn't skimp on child support. He just wasn't interested in being a part of my life. While I was in college, my mom passed away, and he actually showed up at her funeral. He said he would still take care of my needs and that I didn't have to leave my stepfather if I didn't want to. My stepfather was fine with me staying, and my dad continued to pay for my expenses until I finished college. We would meet up whenever he flew in, usually for dinner or lunch. But most of the time, he was with different women who seemed to be around my age, or even younger. I didn't really like it, but I also didn't care that much. I figured it was none of my business, you know? Oh, and by the way, he wasn't married or in any committed relationship during this time. So let me start by giving you some background on my relationship with my dad, before I continue with the story. When the lockdown restrictions were lifted, Sue made a big decision. She wanted to quit her job and make a career change into tech because she was burned out with her current work. I was making a good 6-figure salary, so I could easily cover both of our living expenses without any issues. I wanted to help her out, so I offered to cover her living costs while she paid for her classes herself. She moved in with me, and I even set up a workspace for her right next to mine so she could attend her classes while being close to me. We spent a lot of time together, and sometimes we'd even have my dad over for dinner. Interestingly, my dad decided he liked staying in the same city as me and had no plans of leaving again. It was cool with me because he wasn't getting in the way of my life. Later, I found out the reason was that he had a new girlfriend he was pretty serious about. To give you some background, my dad is a wealthy guy. He inherited some major shares from his parents and waited until his late 40s to sell them, and they were worth a ton of money. He also had a high-paying executive job in a big multinational company, so he was making a lot. Once I settled into my new lifestyle, I got a promotion at work. Even though I still got to work from home mostly, I had to go to the office sometimes. But no matter what, I was always happy to come back home to be with Sue. We were pretty intimate and having a lot of fun during our free time. Sue started feeling restless being at home all the time, so after we talked it over, she decided to get a part-time job back at her old workplace as a temp nurse. The good thing was that she didn't have to take as many shifts, but she was getting paid better than before. She also eased up on her online classes, but after about 3 months of working again, she started complaining about being too tired, and she really looked exhausted too. I tried to help her by giving massages when I could and suggesting she take some time off work to rest, but she said she couldn't because there was nobody to cover her shifts. I didn't push it and let it be. Then she started coming home with expensive stuff she bought, but I wasn't suspicious because she loved shopping and had always sacrificed to buy designer clothes and shoes before we got engaged. I thought she could afford it since she didn't have to worry about living expenses. Gradually, she started taking more and more shifts until her schedule was just as busy as before. We hardly had time together, as her days off and my work days didn't match, and she'd leave for work while I was still asleep and come home just before I went to bed. Despite all that, we still found time to be intimate. About 6 months after she started working, we began planning our wedding. She reduced her workload, saying it would allow us to focus more on the wedding planning. I didn't have any issues with that and supported her plans. I was too swamped with work to be deeply involved in the wedding preparations, but I trusted her decisions. So one night, she comes home and drops a bombshell. She's pregnant. I couldn't contain my excitement. I went all out, buying her a bunch of stuff and treating her to a dinner with my dad and his new girlfriend, who were just as thrilled as I was. Sue decided to quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom, and I supported her decision completely. By then, I had already finished paying off the mortgage and was in a great financial position to provide for my family. Life was going well. I'd come home from work, and Sue would fill me in on her day and all the wedding preparations she was making. I noticed that my dad was spending a lot of time with her, in a good way. It seemed like they were getting along great. What I didn't realize was that she was keeping things from me. When the phone bill arrived, I noticed she was constantly on the phone with him, exchanging lots of texts back and forth. Turns out, they were covering their tracks and I had no idea. Now that I know what was going on between them, I feel incredibly dumb and angry. I got suspicious when Sue kept coming home with shopping bags from fancy stores. It didn't make sense since she wasn't working anymore, and she wasn't using my money either. When I asked her how she afforded all those things, she gave me vague answers that set off my BS detector. So I decided to do some snooping. Once she realized I was suspicious, she stopped bringing new stuff home. But I noticed her with new bags and shoes I hadn't seen before, which made me realize she was still buying expensive things. I couldn't take it anymore and checked her purse, where I found a receipt from her recent shopping trip. Shockingly, it had my father's name on it as the buyer of those things. When she came home, I confronted her about the receipt, and she said my dad needed help buying a gift for his girlfriend, and she gave him advice. As a thank you, he got her those expensive things from the store. Her explanation kinda made sense, but something felt off. There's no way my dad would drop $5,000 on my fiancé just for helping him pick a gift. I started connecting the dots and realized that my fiancé and dad were finding a way to be together almost every day. He was spending more time with Sue than with his own girlfriend. I didn't have concrete evidence, but I was pretty sure something fishy was going on between them. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I sneaked a GPS tracker into Sue's car to see where she went, and I secretly set up cameras all around the house. In the first week, I didn't catch anything unusual. She went to the doctor's and the supermarket, pretty normal stuff. But I knew it was just a matter of time before they slipped up. I finally got the chance I was waiting for when Sue left her phone at home while running to the store. I knew her password, but I never snooped around without a good reason. But this time, I found out she had changed it. I returned the phone, acting all normal, and decided to wait and observe for another week to see if I could figure out the new password. Finally, I got it, and I waited for the perfect moment to get a hold of her phone. That moment came when she left her phone on the coffee table and went to take a bath. I checked her messaging app, but there was nothing useful there. So, I decided to go through her social media apps, and that's when I hit the jackpot on WhatsApp. She had been deleting her chats with him, so I didn't find much there. But what I did find shocked me to the core. She had sent him explicit pictures of herself just earlier that evening, with a message saying, "All yours, Daddy." My father hadn't replied yet, but it was enough to confirm my worst fear. My own dad and my fiancé were having an affair behind my back. The next couple of days were a living nightmare for me. I couldn't handle it anymore, so I decided to take a break from work and go camping to clear my head. But the night before I was supposed to leave, I saw Sue's phone lying around again, and an idea struck me. I installed an app on her phone to spy on her messages in real time and set it up to get notifications whenever she used WhatsApp. Then I packed my things and headed to a city hotel where I drowned my sorrows in alcohol all day. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover but a bit of clarity. If I wanted to confront this situation, I needed solid evidence. I kept a close eye on her messages in real time and saw that she had texted my father almost right after I left the house. After a couple of hours, I watched through the cameras I'd set up and saw my dad's car pull into my driveway. And there it was, the heartbreaking scene. My soon-to-be ex-fiancée welcomed him with a hug and a kiss. She was even wearing the lingerie set I had bought for her on Valentine's Day, the one she hadn't even worn in front of me, but she put it on for my father. I couldn't just let it slide. Both of them needed to face the consequences of betraying me. I secretly recorded their affair and kept the file hidden on my cloud, making sure Sue had no reason to check so she wouldn't know I was on to her and my father. I decided to stop drinking and started plotting my revenge. We still had 3 months until our planned wedding date, but I had to end things before then because I couldn't imagine marrying her again. After my break, I went back home on the 3rd day as planned. There was no trace of my father, as if he had never been there. Sue greeted me warmly and tried to initiate intimacy, but I turned her down. Just being in the same room with her disgusted me. That night, while she slept, I stared at her, wondering how she could lie to my face so easily, and why. I looked around the room and noticed new things, stuff I wouldn't have seen if I wasn't paying attention. There was a new winter coat she couldn't have afforded on her own, and I figured my father must have gotten it for her. As I watched her sleep, I had dark thoughts of wrapping my hands around her neck. The temptation was strong. I dug into her other messages and found out she had been talking to 3 other rich older guys before my dad got involved. When I checked her phone, I found videos of her doing sexual stuff with those men. The last time she had contacted them was before she moved in with me. Now it was clear that she didn't want to move in with me initially, so she could have the time and privacy to sleep with these guys. This discovery explained why she took on extra shifts and why she rushed to go back to work after retiring. It also made sense why she kept bringing home expensive purchases. The sad part was that I had always bought her costly gifts, hoping she'd stop starving herself because I knew how much she liked nice things. I took screenshots of all the messages and printed them out, keeping the videos I found hidden along with the one of her with my dad. The first step of her revenge plan was to become financially dependent on me. I pretended to have a change of heart, telling her I'd pay more attention to her and the baby. I made sure to cover almost everything she wanted, trying to make her feel secure. I'd go out and surprise her with things I knew she liked, while also telling her to stop spending her own money and just ask me. She agreed, being the greedy person she was. I wondered what she told my father, but after that, she stopped bringing new stuff home. I convinced my dad to buy a new apartment in the city so he could spend quality time with his girlfriend, who was also clueless about his cheating. My dad even said he was going to propose to her, and I pretended to be happy because it added a new twist to my plans. While I was spending more time with Sue, she still found moments to text my father and meet up with him. I could see everything happening in real time, but I didn't say anything. At that point, I wasn't even heartbroken anymore. I just wanted to put them through hell for what they did to me. My dad got a new apartment and moved out of Sue's place. I convinced her to sell the apartment and invest the money for the long term. I suggested she buy some crypto, but it was a shaky coin that might go belly up soon. Surprisingly, she agreed, and I helped her with the whole process. Taking control of her finances, I discovered that she was almost completely broke. Apparently, instead of getting money from her sugar daddies, she only received gifts. And since she stopped working, she had no income at all. I kept gathering evidence leading up to the wedding. My dad asked if he could propose to his real girlfriend during the rehearsal dinner, and I reluctantly agreed. The printouts of their conversations had piled up, forming a thick book's worth of evidence. I went to a guy who ran a publishing company and asked him to turn the printout into small books, making around 30 copies. That way, I could give them out at the wedding rehearsal, and there would be enough for everyone attending, including Sue's family and friends. I compiled everything into the book, which I titled Sugar Baby Sue. I was sure it would make a big impact. I spoke with the wedding planner and arranged to include the book in the gift bags for everyone at the rehearsal dinner. The wedding planner read the book and got all flustered. I warned her not to say anything to my soon-to-be ex-fiancé if she didn't want to lose her bonus. I also asked her to cancel all the wedding bookings since it wasn't happening and to keep things low-key. Thankfully, I managed to get my money back from some of the vendors we had hired for the wedding. I created a video montage from all the videos I had and added special effects to make it more impactful. I sat down with my father's girlfriend and spilled the beans about everything that had been happening between the man she loved and the woman I loved. She was devastated and wanted to break up with him right away, but I pleaded with her to wait until I had completed my revenge. During the wedding rehearsal, when my father took the microphone and started talking about marriage and how Sue and I would be a perfect couple, I secretly signaled the DJ and my father's girlfriend. While my dad was talking, the DJ prepared to play the video I had sent him. When my father presented the ring he was going to use to propose, the whole audience gasped. He thought they were shocked by the ring, but it was actually because of the video playing in the background. Everyone was horrified. At the end of the video, I made a little speech telling them to check the special book in the gift bags. The party ended with Sue's parents yelling and screaming at her. I left without her and went back home. While we were at the party, I had Sue's belongings arranged outside the house and changed the locks and passcode so she couldn't get back in. I think she managed to get a ride home because I heard her knocking on the door late at night. The next day, I sent her a long message making it clear that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. I told her not to use the child as an excuse to stay in my life. I said that when the baby was born, she should have her lawyer contact mine so we could do a DNA test. Only the results would determine if I would ever talk to her again. I didn't bother texting my father. I blocked them on social media and changed my phone numbers. I even sold my house and bought an apartment in the city. I cut off all contact with them completely. Update. It's been 9 months since then, and Sue contacted me through my lawyer. The baby was 3 months old, and she wanted to do the DNA test. The results came in, and I am not the father of the baby, and neither is my father. I can finally remove her completely from my life. Story 2. Let me start from the beginning here. Yesterday, I had a meeting with my fiancé at our wedding venue to finalize some details, as we're getting married in 4 months. We drove there separately since she was coming straight from work. Towards the end of the meeting, she mentioned that her friend needed a ride home, and she asked if it would be okay. I didn't think much of it since I know her friend well, and it wasn't too far from our place. Once I got home, I tried to reach my fiancé for the next 3 hours, but she didn't answer. At around the 1:30 mark, I texted her friend to check if everything was all right. I was really worried. Finally, my fiancé came home and said sorry for taking so long. She hung out with her friend for a bit before heading back. I was okay with it but asked her to keep me informed next time. But then, her friend replied a few minutes later saying, "Sorry, I couldn't make it to the venue. I didn't see your fiancé tonight." I was confused and asked her why she would say that. She replied saying she didn't know and walked away. At this point, I was really suspicious and felt something was off. I've never done this before, but I checked her phone records. Yes, I did it and I don't regret it. I noticed that when she went outside, she called her friend who texted me right after she went out. I also saw a 1-hour call with a number I didn't recognize while she was on her way to the venue. I started asking her various questions about the rental place they went to and other things. She answered quickly, and her explanations seemed legit. I thought, maybe I'm overthinking this, I should calm down and sleep on it. This morning, I asked her to show me the text from her friend asking her for a ride, and I said I would apologize for questioning her the night before. However, she refused to show me. Then I confronted her about the call I saw on her phone while we were driving to the venue, and she said it was the friend she picked up later. I knew right then she was lying because I had checked her phone records, and it didn't match. She then changed her story, saying she needed to meet a coworker named Michael to discuss a patient. I was confused and asked why they couldn't discuss it over the phone. I was getting really suspicious at this point since we've always been honest with each other. I asked her to show me the texts with Michael, but she refused. I questioned why she wouldn't show me if there was nothing to hide. I even asked if she was having an affair, or if she didn't want to be with me anymore. She paused for a moment, and then started listing all the things she thinks are wrong with me, like working too much, not spending enough time with her, and not listening. I was shocked at this point because all of this was news to me. I started putting things together and realized something fishy was going on. I insisted on seeing the texts again, and after about half an hour of convincing, she finally showed them to me. They were crazy, filled with sexual content, and talking a lot of crap about me. It was clear that she wanted to be with him and that they were basically in love. She just started this job 1.5 months ago, and he's her co-worker, much older and divorced with multiple kids. Meanwhile, I have been financially supporting her while she got back on her feet, and she was working extra hours to avoid getting a part-time job. We live together in our house with 3 dogs and a horse. I can't believe this is happening, especially since we were supposed to get married in 4 months. I'm feeling lost and don't know what to do. Any advice would be appreciated. Update. So I finally had a chance to talk with her tonight and sort things out. But, once again, she tried to put the blame on me for what she did. She justified her cheating and lying, saying it was because I didn't communicate well and didn't listen enough. According to her, if I had been a better listener, she wouldn't have started talking to that guy. She complained that I spent too much time in the office working and not enough time with her. I tried to explain that I was putting in extra hours at work to support her and the family financially while she was struggling, so she wouldn't have to get a part-time job. But she said she would rather have gotten a part-time job, which doesn't make sense to me at all. She thought since the whole thing was short-lived, just 1 week she claims, and they only made out once, we could move past it. But when I brought up the texts where she was talking trash about me and having sexual conversations with him, she changed the subject, and I got nowhere. I told her that I'm not the reason all this happened. She went too far without considering the consequences or talking to me about her feelings. I explained that I can never trust her again, and this mess is all because of her actions. It's her choice if she wants to try and blame me for all of this. Towards the end of our talk, things calmed down a bit. I told her, listen, we really need to figure out what to do about the house we own together and our 3 dogs. After some discussion, we reached 2 options. Either I stay and buy her out, or we sell the house and find new places. As for the dogs, we still need to decide who gets which one. That's where we left things tonight, and I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. I'm curious to know what you all would do about the house. I can handle the financial aspect alone, but it's a big place with nearly 3,000 square feet and 5 acres of land, mainly bought for her horse. She's taking the horse with her and boarding it at a barn when she leaves. Update. Day 3. I had a long 3-hour talk with her tonight. We discussed our relationship and what led to everything that happened. It started with her pointing out what I did wrong in our relationship. Lack of communication, spending too much time working and on my phone. I can't deny any of these points. My reason for working so much was to support the family. I run an e-commerce business on the side, and I'm the only one handling customer service, so deals happen around the clock. I'm always on the clock. I should have been better about putting my phone aside and responding to people the next day. The lack of communication was a two-way street, and a perfect example of that is the fact that I had no idea she was unhappy with any of this. She never communicated it to me. She said she felt I would have gotten upset if she told me, but she never gave me a chance to work on it. I know I'm not perfect, and many times I do or say things that she misinterprets as rude. For instance, a week or 2 ago, I was trying to help her with a budget to tackle her financial problems and set up a plan to get her back on track. Just to note, I work in finance and do this kind of stuff for clients all the time. She mentioned she owed me around $1,000 and said she'd pay me back on her next paycheck. But when we went through the transfers to our joint account, it turned out to be over $5,000. I didn't mean to make her feel bad. I just wanted her to realize how much I've been contributing. Unfortunately, she took it as me trying to humiliate her. Maybe my timing was off, but I was only trying to help and ensure our financial situation was okay. We still had a lot to pay for the wedding, and I was being cautious with budgeting to make sure we had enough. It really bothers me that she keeps justifying her actions by blaming my flaws. She tells me she's surprised that I would throw away 7 years of our relationship like this. I have to keep reminding her that I didn't throw it away. She did with her actions. She says I told too many people too quickly, and we could have resolved all of this between us. She also believes she wouldn't have talked to someone else if I was a better listener and communicator. I finally figured out the full extent of the affair, and based on the texts I read, I believe it started about 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if they had met up outside of work before, but this time, he asked her to the park to play basketball and talk. They ended up making out, and while I'm pretty certain it didn't go further than that yet, I believe it would have in the near future. She insists he's not her boyfriend, and tonight she's gone off somewhere, and I'm guessing it's with him or a girlfriend. Living together is awkward right now, but I hope this gets resolved soon. I think she wants us to get back together and work things out. The main issue was a lack of communication that built up over time while we lived our boring, simple life. We never discussed this problem, and instead of talking to me, she acted out and spoke badly about me behind my back. She could be very sneaky, and I don't know if I can trust her completely again. The easiest thing would be to take her back, but I don't think I'd ever be truly happy doing that. Understanding the real cause has helped me feel better. It gives me a chance to work on my own flaws and communication issues and view things from a different perspective. Today, I hit the gym and plan to stick to a routine. I'm also going back to studying for my CFP designation. I took the week off work to focus on my mental health. I called the wedding venue and officially canceled the date. We got some money back, but we still lost a bit unless someone else takes the date. I updated her parents again to keep them in the loop. They live far away and are probably worried sick. I assure them that everything is calm and fine and they don't need to worry about their daughter. After some research, I found that with the current interest rates, I won't be able to find a comparable house for the same mortgage I'm paying now. Apartments are expensive too. So, I think it's best to try and buy out her share and have her find an apartment. She seems to be okay with it right now. We'll get an appraiser to assess the value and figure out if I can manage half of the equity. Update. It's been almost a month since this whole situation went down, and I want to give you all an update. It's been a whirlwind of emotions and events. I'll be honest, in the few days after it happened, I was a mess, trying to get back with that cheating jerk. It's embarrassing to admit, but it's all part of the process of moving on. In that vulnerable state, I tried everything to make things right and better, but nothing worked. She told me she had to choose between me and him, and she chose him. That's when I finally woke up and realized I had let my self-worth plummet. I needed to step back and focus on myself and what's best for me. It's tough after 7 years of putting someone else first, but that's exactly what I've been doing since. I moved our joint savings to my own checking account. I figured out what was owed to me and transferred half of the balance back to the joint account for her to take. I've been hitting the gym every day since this happened. It not only improves how I look, but it helps me think clearly too. I've been doing some fun stuff lately, like shopping for suits, getting massages, and hanging out with friends and family. Looking back, I realized this relationship was isolating me from the people who care about me, which should have been a major warning sign. I never really did anything for myself. It was always about providing for my partner and our pets. But now, I'm changing that. I started seeing a therapist for the first time, and it's been helpful to talk things out and make decisions. I might even continue therapy after this situation is resolved to keep improving myself. As for the living situation, I'm still in the same house with my ex. She's sleeping in the guest bedroom, and we only communicate about practical stuff like feeding the dogs. I think she's a terrible person, and no matter what I say, she blames me for everything. It's ridiculous because she accused me of being a bad communicator, but then she couldn't communicate her feelings and ended up cheating. It's like she's living in her own delusional world. I've given up trying to reason with her because it's pointless. I've been keeping things moving by putting the house up for sale. I reached out to an agent, and after hearing their proposed sale price, my ex asked me to contact 2 other agents for their opinions. It wasn't fair, but I went ahead and set up all the appointments and met with them. Eventually, we chose the first agent we talked to. We got the pictures taken on Sunday and listed the house for sale that same night. The open house is set for next Saturday, and we're already getting a lot of attention on the real estate websites. My ex will be taking the horse to a barn, though we haven't decided where yet. As for the dogs, I offered to take 1 or none, but she wants to keep all 3 together, which is fine with me. It allows me to have a fresh start. Surprisingly, about a week ago, I met someone new, and we've been spending a lot of time together. I'm not expecting anything serious, but it's nice to have her company. She's been really supportive since she's been through a similar situation in the past. Talking to a kind, thoughtful, and independent woman has been a real eye-opener for me. It made me realize how much of a narcissist my ex was, so self-centered, manipulative, and dependent. I wish I had listened to the warnings from my family and friends much earlier. I got caught up in a simple routine, not really enjoying life, but just going with the flow because it was comfortable. We had a nice house, lots of land, and great pets. My partner, who's 25, and I, a 27-year-old, have been in a relationship for around 2 years. The initial months were pure joy, and for a while, I was convinced she was my soulmate. We shared a 2-bedroom apartment, both contributing to our living expenses from our monthly paychecks. I'm a junior sales rep, and she works as a receptionist at a mid-range hotel just a few blocks from my office. It's fair to say we were financially stable and ready to take our relationship to the next level. One day, she invited me to spend a couple of weeks at her parents' place. They were incredibly welcoming, and I enjoyed the mini break, except for the unspoken rule of no intimacy under their roof. However, one thing that intrigued and slightly unsettled me was her close-knit relationship with her childhood friends and their kids. One guy, in particular David, seemed to pose a potential threat to our relationship. He was a towering figure, standing at 6'2", with a dark complexion and a knack for whispering jokes into my girlfriend's ear, making her giggle. My girlfriend's mother would often tease me by calling him my rival, a joke that didn't sit well with me. This situation started to gnaw at me, so I decided to confront my girlfriend about him. She dismissed my concerns the second time around, assuring me, "You're overthinking it. You're the only one I see." Despite my lingering doubts about him, her words eventually put me at ease. One day, she and her entire family embarked on a week-long Bible camp retreat in the forest. I didn't join them as I'm not particularly religious, and besides, I wasn't invited. She mentioned that some family friends, including David's parents, would be attending the camp. When I asked if David would be there, she assured me he wouldn't be. So, I felt there was no need to worry further. However, 2 days into the retreat, I couldn't reach her. Despite numerous attempts, her phone was consistently off. So I stopped trying and decided to wait for her return. Upon her return, I questioned her about her phone being off, to which she responded, "We were in the woods. What did you expect?" I didn't press further. I also asked if David was present, and she reiterated that he wasn't. For a while, I believed everything was fine. Fast forward 2 months post her trip, I was at a friend's birthday party at a club. There was a familiar face that kept glancing my way until I decided to approach her for a chat. She introduced herself as Angela and mentioned, "We've met before at your girlfriend's dad's place." She was David's girlfriend and had accompanied him during one of our visits to my girlfriend's house. We chatted about various things, and it turned out that I wasn't the only one feeling uneasy about the peculiar relationship between my girlfriend and David. She shared how David had left her alone for a week under the pretext of attending a Bible camp, and she was certain my girlfriend was also there. I didn't confirm her suspicions or mention that my girlfriend had assured me David wasn't present. I simply nodded along with everything she said, feeling too bewildered and betrayed to utter a word. Upon returning home, I decided not to make any hasty decisions. I needed some solid proof to validate my suspicions. So I resolved to check her phone, the only place I could potentially find the evidence I needed. One day, while she was in the shower, I seized the opportunity to snoop. As soon as I unlocked her phone, her messaging app popped up, with David's name at the top of the list. It seemed they were arguing about something. But what? I decided to dig deeper, and there it was. The most significant betrayal I had ever experienced. She had messaged him saying she was pregnant with his child, but he denied it, claiming he wasn't her only partner. She informed him that it couldn't possibly be my child, as per her ultrasound. The timing didn't align, given that we hadn't been intimate during the week of the camp and for a few weeks prior. Moreover, we hadn't been intimate immediately after the camp either, largely due to her own avoidance. He then accused her of seducing him throughout the camp and expressed that he wasn't ready to be a father just yet. After a barrage of insults and angry emojis, they both agreed to pin the pregnancy on me. It seemed like the best solution for everyone, given my love for children and his disinterest in having any part in the child's life. I was so stunned that I'm surprised I managed to take a screenshot of the conversation and send it to my phone before she finished showering. The next day she dropped the bombshell. She told me she had news, but she wasn't sure if I'd consider it good or bad. Then, she announced that she was pregnant. I wanted to react, to ask more questions, but I knew that would only raise her suspicions. So, I put on a smile, hugged her, and told her it was fantastic news. She left for work that day, happy and completely unaware of the turmoil in my mind. I reached out to a lawyer friend for guidance, and he advised me to request a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. This would provide evidence that I wasn't the father before the baby's birth, and before she could list me on the birth certificate. My mind was in a whirl, unsure of how to proceed. If I asked her gently, she'd suspect something was amiss and decline. If I demanded it, she'd flatly refuse. Unable to think of any other solution, I decided to pack my things and leave our shared home. Once she noticed my absence, she started calling incessantly. I ignored her calls and eventually blocked her number. About a week after I left, she decided to publicly announce her pregnancy by posting her ultrasound image on Facebook. She accompanied it with a heartfelt message about the highs and lows of impending motherhood, and tagged me in the post. When someone inquired about the baby's father in the comments, she seized the opportunity to slander me, claiming that I had abandoned her and our unborn child. I couldn't stand by and let her lies and manipulations continue unchecked. I needed to act swiftly to clear my name. So, I made a post on my Facebook page, sharing the screenshot I'd taken from her phone where they both admitted that the baby was his and agreed to pin the pregnancy on me. I tagged her in the post and added a caption, "No way, Jose." Within minutes, the post blew up and chaos ensued. She bombarded me with messages on Messenger, pleading with me to remove the post. She begged me to consider our child and not to humiliate her in such a manner. My post was swamped with likes, comments, and my inbox was filled with messages from her family hurling insults at me, as well as from people expressing their concern and curiosity. I stood my ground and refused to take down the post. Why should I? Even David had the audacity to slide into my DMs and say, "Not cool, bro." Not cool? I beg to differ. Trying to pin a child that isn't mine on me, now that's not cool. With the help of her parents, who were desperate for closure, and to pin the child support on the actual father, I was able to secure a prenatal paternity test. The court confirmed that the baby wasn't mine, and my lawyer issued her a cease and desist order to prevent her from listing me as the father on the birth certificate. Once everything was settled, we went our separate ways. Now, I'm in a committed relationship with Angela, David's ex-girlfriend. We've both endured so much at the hands of those two, it only seemed fitting that we found solace and love in each other's company. Story 2. I was raised in a quaint town, deeply in love with my high school sweetheart. I envisioned our life together as a heartwarming country song. We were each other's firsts, and had been together for 5 years. I was on the brink of proposing to her. At least, that was the plan. We were supposed to go to the same college, then tie the knot. But all that changed one fateful night when I found her in a nightclub restroom with a promoter. I was shattered, and this incident, along with others that followed, left me deeply scarred and wary of women throughout my adult life. I'll share some of the most distressing, misused experiences that have left me feeling broken. My then-girlfriend once declared that those who cheat should be hanged. We were watching a movie together when a character cheated on her spouse, and she made this comment with a look of utter disgust on her face. I remember thinking, she's the woman of my dreams. Little did I know that a year later, I'd find her in a public restroom. I never imagined she could cheat on me. Our parents were friends and trusted us implicitly. She could even stay over at my place without them batting an eyelid. Our families were convinced we were destined to be together. However, when she turned 20, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, she yearned for the party life, the club scene. But since we were both under 21, we couldn't get into the kind of club she was interested in. As an introvert, I was okay with waiting until I was of legal age, but she was insistent on getting a fake ID. I voiced my concerns about the risks, but she wasn't deterred. A few weeks later, she turned up with a remarkably authentic-looking fake ID. When I asked where she got it, she mentioned a guy who had made fake IDs for some of her friends. Despite my reservations, I agreed to get a fake ID so we could hit the clubs together. I was more of a homebody, so the club scene, with its loud music and bustling crowds, wasn't really my cup of tea. But ever since she turned 20, she seemed to have this urge to experience it all. She even labeled me as dull when I expressed my reluctance to join her in environments rife with pills and alcohol. According to her, This was what young adults were supposed to do. And we shouldn't miss out just because all her friends were partaking. Wanting her to be happy, I reluctantly agreed to join her. I even convinced a close friend to come along, and we both ended up getting fake IDs. Fast forward to the next Friday. We had plans to hit the town, but I fell ill and couldn't make it. I assumed my girlfriend would cancel too, but she decided to go with one of her girlfriends instead. I recall thinking that she seemed different, and even her circle of friends had changed. The following week, when I was feeling better, we decided to go out again, this time with my best friend. As we arrived at the club, I was anxious that the fake ID wouldn't pass muster. To my relief, the bouncer barely glanced at it before letting us in. I would later discover that this club was notorious for lax ID checks and was eventually shut down for serving alcohol to minors. Once inside, I noticed a red flag. My girlfriend was enthusiastically waving at a tall, well-dressed guy standing near the entrance. He winked at her, and she responded with a broad smile. When I asked who he was, she casually mentioned that he was just a promoter. I tried to probe further, feeling a pang of jealousy, but the blaring music made conversation difficult. She never answered my question, presumably because she couldn't hear me over the noise. We got our drinks and started to mingle, following the crowd's lead. The more we drank, the more enjoyable the music became. My buddy and I were dancing and having a blast. Suddenly, I realized my girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. I asked my friend if he'd seen her, and he said she'd gone to the restroom. About 10 minutes later, she still hadn't returned, and we decided to explore the upstairs area. We'd heard there was another bar up there with a great city view. We thought we'd take a quick look and then head back downstairs before my girlfriend returned and started looking for us. Upstairs was more of a lounge area, quieter and with comfy couches. It was an open roof, so the noise from downstairs was less intense. As we headed towards the bar, I spotted a woman in the corner who looked a lot like my girlfriend, chatting with the same guy we'd seen at the entrance. I moved closer to confirm it was her, and sure enough, there she was, smiling and engaged in conversation with him. I interrupted them and asked my girlfriend to join us immediately. The guy just smiled at me, while my girlfriend looked annoyed, as if I'd interrupted something significant. I asked her who he was and how she knew him. She replied that she was trying to get us into the VIP section, that he was a cool club promoter, and that he was friends with everyone. She added that he had lots of female friends, so I had nothing to worry about. I expressed my disappointment that she'd left us without saying where she was going, and I made it clear that I wasn't interested in the VIP area. I wanted her to stay with me and not to chat with that guy again. She accused me of being jealous and controlling, which led to an argument. I left her with my friend in the corner and went to fetch us some drinks. When I returned, she was engrossed in her phone, texting someone. My friend then excused himself to find the restroom downstairs, leaving me alone with my girlfriend, who was still engrossed in her phone and not speaking to me due to our earlier argument. A few minutes later, she stood up, ready to leave. I asked her where she was going, and she replied, with a hint of sarcasm, that she was off to the restroom and invited me to follow her since I seemed to have trust issues. I chose to ignore her comment as she stormed off. Now I was alone, waiting for both my friend and my girlfriend to return. After a few minutes, my friend came back, grinning from ear to ear. I asked him what was so funny, and he shared that while he was in the restroom washing his hands, he overheard a couple getting intimate in one of the stalls. We were aware of the wild antics that could occur in clubs, and we both found the story amusing, chuckling about it. But an instinctive feeling nudged me to dash downstairs and see the spectacle for myself. Being a newbie to the clubbing scene, I'd heard of such incidents happening frequently, and had seen posts about it online. I was curious to witness it firsthand. I asked my friend to direct me to the restroom, then I hurried downstairs hoping to catch the action before it ended. Upon reaching the restroom, I had to wait in line for a bit. The place was chaotic, filled with inebriated people, chatting loudly and laughing. There were about 6 stalls, but I couldn't hear any sounds of intimacy like my friend had described. I started to think maybe my friend was pulling my leg, so I decided to use the urinal, which was positioned parallel to the stalls. As I was relieving myself, one of the stall doors swung open. I instinctively glanced over my shoulder to see who was coming out. To my utter shock, it was my girlfriend emerging from the stall. She was adjusting her dress, and right behind her was the promoter, fastening his belt. I was so stunned that I didn't even notice that I had started to pee on my own pants. I yelled out her name, demanding to know why she was sleeping with him. She was taken aback by my discovery and was at a loss for words. She eventually retorted that I was causing her embarrassment. Can you believe that? She had just emerged from a men's restroom after doing, well, you know what? And she had the audacity to say that I was the one embarrassing her. I hurled a barrage of insults at her, causing her even more embarrassment. The crowd around us laughed and jeered as our argument escalated. Meanwhile, the club promoter had vanished without my noticing. I told her to go home with the club promoter she was sleeping with and declared that we were done. I stormed upstairs and informed my friend that we were leaving. He trailed behind me, asking about my girlfriend, but I didn't reveal anything until we reached the car. He was dumbfounded when I told him that the girl he had heard having sex in the men's restroom was my girlfriend. I was in disbelief. How could she do this to me? The image of her emerging from the restroom kept replaying in my mind, haunting me even as I penned down this account. I was fuming and cursing her all the way home after dropping off my friend. She even had the gall to call me, questioning why I had left her at the club. I retorted that her new boyfriend should be the one to take her home. I got home and spent the entire night wide awake, unable to sleep. She kept ringing my phone, but I just let it ring. I should have blocked her number, but it wasn't that simple to just cut her off. At the same time, I was too furious to even consider talking to her. The next morning, she showed up at my doorstep, pleading for me to take her back and blaming her actions on the alcohol and its intoxicating effects. I asked her how many times they had been intimate, and she claimed it was just that once. However, I later discovered from her friends that she had visited that club several times before we went together, which suggested that she must have done it more than once. However, I later discovered from her friends that she had visited that club several times before we went together, which suggested that she must have done it more than once. The breakup left me shattered. I lost my appetite and couldn't eat properly for days. My parents became concerned, and I finally told them about what my ex-girlfriend had done. They informed her parents, who then confiscated her fake ID. This led to a huge argument between her and her parents, which eventually resulted in them kicking her out of the house. Rumors started to spread about her, and people began to exaggerate the story, claiming that multiple men had taken turns with her. I had no idea how or where these embellishments originated. She became infamous in our town for her actions and had to move away. Her relationship with her parents remained strained due to the incident at the club's restroom. The fact that she was known as the girl who got in a men's bathroom was not only humiliating for her, but also for me, even after our breakup. I made the choice to relocate, leaving behind my friends, family, and all the drama. I moved 2 states over to escape the humiliation. I left everything behind and started anew. My plan was to focus on myself and steer clear of serious relationships. I stuck to my plan and spent my college years casually dating without any serious commitments. I was a bachelor, enjoying the company of different girls, and I loved it. After college, I landed a job and put all thoughts of my ex-girlfriend behind me. I never let my guard down because I didn't want to experience that kind of disappointment again. I thought my ex-girlfriend was one of a kind, but she turned out to be the exact opposite. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious ever developed. I would bring girls to family events because I didn't want to attend alone. My family wasn't too fond of the girls I dated because they had tattoos or dressed differently. The girls I was seeing were city girls, some a bit wild, but I preferred them over pretentious girls like my ex who cheated on me. After landing a job, I met a new girl at work who was simply amazing. She completely transformed my life. I didn't see any obvious red flags, so I allowed myself to be vulnerable again. However, after a few months, I started getting this nagging feeling that she might be cheating on me. I was experiencing panic attacks and the like. I brought up my concerns to her, and as expected, she denied everything. A few more months passed without any issues. She had already met all my family and friends. Everyone seemed to genuinely like her, which was unusual because no one had ever really warmed up to anyone I'd dated since my ex, who cheated on me. I took this as a positive sign. Still, it took me some time to trust her enough to let her move in with me. We started living together and everything seemed to be going well. But then, the intrusive thoughts began. She had me convinced that I was losing my mind, to the point where I considered admitting myself to a mental health facility. I thought I was dragging past trauma into my current relationship. I kept trying to reassure myself that maybe it was just my past haunting me and I had nothing to worry about. Everyone else was telling me the same thing. In November 2021, we got a positive pregnancy test. Considering this was my first child, I was over the moon. But then, in December 2021, just a few weeks later, those unsettling feelings returned. I started digging into her social media and was shocked by what I discovered. It turned out she had been cheating on me for about 11 months. I immediately downloaded all the chat logs and accessed every account I could. I didn't stumble upon any concrete proof of physical contact, just the exchange of explicit photos, which, in my eyes, is still infidelity. She had also been sharing intimate pictures and videos of me, even agreeing to some involving me without my consent. Every day, I'd uncover more, and she'd insist, "That's all there is. I have no reason to lie to you." At one point, she even told me I didn't have the right to know. Now, I'm left questioning the paternity of this child. Again, I found no evidence of her physically meeting someone else, and believe me, I dug deep. I'm not sure if I'm being irrational for doubting the child's paternity. At this point, she's still in her first trimester, and the thought of waiting until birth to know for sure is torturous. I want to be happy with her and raise our child, but the nagging doubts are unbearable. I can't believe I'm going through this again. I started to wonder if all women are like this, or if I'm just incredibly unlucky. Clearly, I can't just take her word for it. Even if I were on my deathbed, I doubt she'd tell me the truth. My job has given me a background in interrogation, so I have a knack for detecting lies. But she's a tough nut to crack. It's especially difficult when it involves someone close to you, as opposed to a stranger you know nothing about. I still have a strong feeling she's not being entirely truthful. I was utterly bewildered and didn't know what my next move should be. I left my own house to crash at a friend's place just to clear my head. She pleaded with me to return, but I told her I needed a prenatal paternity test. She argued that such a test could harm the baby. I did some digging online and sent her the information, proving her wrong. After several days of back and forth, she finally agreed to take the test. And, as it turned out, the baby wasn't mine. Once I discovered that, I asked her to leave my house. Her main concern was that she didn't want to terminate the pregnancy due to her beliefs. I questioned her if having an affair was also against her beliefs. She was left speechless. I told her that whether she chose to keep the baby or not was irrelevant to me. What mattered was that she needed to be out of my house by the next day. Apparently, she decided to terminate the pregnancy because 3 months later, there were no signs of her being pregnant. We continued to work at the same place for another 5 months before I decided to look for another job, as she kept trying to reconcile with me. I, 38-year-old guy, was tight buddies with this dude Tony since we were 8. We were like brothers, told everyone we were practically family. After school, we even got a place together, and he was the first one to meet my future wife. He had our backs, promised to watch over us whenever we hung out with him. He didn't mind getting all sentimental with me. We meant a ton to each other. But even with our tight bond, Tony and I had a difference when it came to booze. He hit the bottle every day but kept it in check after work and on weekends. He never slacked at his job or acted irresponsible. So our friendship carried on, and I never brought up his drinking. The next thing I recall is showing up at the wine tasting as a surprise treat for my wife. I gave her a tap on the shoulder